So you wanted to make an album.
Another one, yes.
What is this, number 10?
I think hard to know, hard to tell.
It depends on what you count.
Well, yeah, because if I count live things and then, so yeah, roughly 10. Let's call it roughly number 10. Yeah. Because there's been live albums and solo stuff, just acoustic or live, and then different releases. But we'll call it 10. Why not?
But when did you? So you're writing always, I imagine. Like
right. Yeah.
any person
who's a writer. Yeah, if you're a writer, you have to write, don't you? Can't be.
I think that's kind of the gig. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're not writing, I don't think you'd call yourself a writer. But at some point, you decide that you want to do something with the current songs, or are they current?
I think I get one song is usually what dictates an album for me, and that's like, okay, I can now hang other songs on this.
Oh, okay.
And that's how I see it, because I have a bunch of songs I haven't recorded, songs that I would like to record, and then I usually come up with a new one, and that dictates a direction. And in this case, it was, which is the opening song, which is FM radio. And I just thought there's something there, there's an atmosphere, there's a mood, there's a feel, and then when I start to imagine how the band would sound with that, it expands that canvas, and I'm like, okay, well now I need songs that do this and that. And the whole concept, which is a funny word, I think like, what album isn't a concept album? Sorry, there was no thought in that album at all. We just did it, nobody listened or thought about it.
I think there's a lot of albums like that.
Really? I don't know, it's impressive if there is. But anyway, so the concept develops based on one song, which then when you find a partner, a song, which is usually an opposite, which I guess in this case would have been Blue Hotel. Mm-hmm. I think they have a similar mood. And for me, it started to tell a story, so I could see a story arc involved, even though I'm not sure yet what the whole story arc is. But I see the characters develop in those songs, and I think, okay, there's something in common there. They're clearly road songs. I think Blue Hotel is probably a very trashy motel rather than a hotel,
Right.
And so all of a sudden I have this road song and I've got this motel. I'm like, okay, well, is it the same person? And what's happening here? And that starts to develop the whole concept. And I'm like, okay, I know what it is, and I have to figure out what it isn't, the album. And then I'm looking for, ruling out songs I have based on that factor. Does it fit into that story, into the arc of the story? And slowly it coalesces, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't want this massive long album, and so 10 songs, and you fill in those blanks. And I found myself looking through some old, one of the songs is, I think, 15 or more years old, which was I Can't Stop Breaking My Own Heart, which was, we recorded in a band I was in years ago. We did a demo, had loads of money thrown at it, and nothing happened. It just, we recorded a bunch of stuff, but that was one of the songs, and I always think if a song lingers, if I remember it, there's a chance other people will, and that's a strong indicator. So that one is very old, and then others in between I've written in the past maybe 2 years, so most of the other ones would be quite new.
Okay.
Yeah, aside from that one.
And so the road is very clear, especially in FM radio. Like, it jumps out musically. You feel like it's a road song. Yeah. And is that how it started, or were you imagining the road as the concept? Do you feel like that's the theme that's kind of holding everything together?
For sure. I mean, that's why it's the opening song, and like I said, it was the one that dictated the album, the starting point. It's
the title of the album.
Exactly. Yeah. So Magistrala, which should be Magistrala in Bulgarian, but I think people in English will read it as Magistrala, which is just highway.
Right.
But then of course that opens up all those avenues of the blues, of Lost Highway, of endless road songs. The Doors, I mean, they have that sound as well. There's so many people have tapped into it, but it implies a journey, and a journey of life, a journey of many stages of life as well. And so yeah, FM radio had that in my head straight away. That's why it's the driving simplicity of it. I didn't want to complicate it in too many ways, so the chord structure is simple, with just that one little major to minor change, which I thought for me, I always want to do something different. You know, it would be easy to play it straight, but doing that in the chorus, I thought that's quite a cool thing to do, to do that major minor change right at the end of a chorus, and it flips it on its head again. So I quite like that one. And then I knew there should be slide on it too. That was another, you know, I don't know about you, but I get these things when I write, even at the very basic start of a song, I'm like, it has to have, I just hear these parts.
Right.
Even though they're not, I can't hear the part, I'm like, no, but it has to have this certain things.
Well, did you have a certain songwriting process through this album that was different than other albums? Like, did you start with the lyrics in advance because you had this sense of the story you were trying to tell? Or did you bounce back and forth with the music?
I think there's always an effort to push the processes involved, and so a lot of the songs, a few of them actually, was one exercise I did, and wasn't connected to the album. It's how they came about. Was I like to imagine writing songs for someone else. So a few of the songs were on this concept album for another artist that I thought, hey, I could write songs for him. And it's more an exercise for me. I'm just interested in where it will bring me.
It's free.
Yeah. So like I can step outside myself. And so with Blue Hotel, for instance, I thought that's kind of, there was something maybe Billy Joel about the chord structure, and I liked that idea, that 70s songwriter vibe, something a bit more complex. But if I did that on one song, I'm not going to lean into that on every song.
Right.
You know, but there was certain pushing myself out into a new place, you know, with those more interesting chord structures. Right. I think like If the Moon is another one. It's a very strange, bizarre, you know, shifting from B minor to F, with just not natural progression, and yet making it seem very light and easy. And I think that was, again, an example of being uncomfortable in a way to do it, and then I'm like, that's the right way. If you're uncomfortable, you're on new territory. You know.
Speaking of chord structure, actually, I did a little analysis of, because it claims to be a very simple song, which is "Sing Me Home." It's after the band gets through with it, this thing is, I don't know, it's got at least 30 chords going through it. It moves simply through the first eight.
Right.
It starts, you know, it's the D minor. It's in the key of C. You think this is going to be the simplest thing of all time, but hidden in there through different, you know, harmonics and such. It moves from the D minor to the A minor to the F to some E sus to an E augmented to F sus to a C sus, and A flat half diminished and A flat diminished, and it moves all through these things, and yet it's meant to just be 3 chords in a way.
Yeah. I
pushing through. So let's start at the end and let's talk about what's going on there. Okay, how did you get there? I mean, what's the song?
Being the last song on the album, I think. Yeah, when we started to work on that song, I remember bringing it to the band and thinking, there's almost no song here to show them. It's like, it's all in my head.
Yeah.
I'm like, they're either going to love it or think I'm crazy. Either way, I'm going to do it. But because it is so weirdly simple when you strip everything back. But then when you start adding these layers, as you say, there's something else happens. But that was quite an instant song to write, the basic structure, because it was, you know, it was based on the death of someone we both know, and you know, the morning he died, I happened to be away playing a gig, and so I was in a foreign place, foreign town, you know, and I just knew I had to write it then based on how I was feeling. So I wanted to write the song for Arthur, but I also knew I did not want to make this maudlin thing, and I'd started to get that idea of, well, if you're going to celebrate a life, who does it best? And it has to be in Nolans, right? That's where they do it best. Because it has that really heavy sense of morbidity in it, you know, and that it is a morbid thing, but then they celebrate because a life has been lived. It's not a death that's happened. We're celebrating a life has been lived. So in the studio, that's where it started to come more alive, which I, you know, always hoped it would. when we played it, and it was like deathly slow to play. It's one of those ones like, oh my God. It's like dragging, nope, we're still speeding up. Dragging, nope, still speeding up. And we eventually got this really, really, you know, which I wanted, this slow thing, but it had to have some kind of a swing to it. And I think with Borchito, the drummer, I mean, he can do that kind of thing, which is very hard. And the band got on it and managed to get right in there. I think the guitars as well, not mine, but the other guitar, Kirill played these swells that are like an organ, you know, like a church organ. That's perfect. It's right there. And as soon as you start doing that, you start adding these things, like you say, you get these different chords are implied. And then we have the sax harmonies and vocal harmonies, and this whole tableau opened up, which is how it had to, you know, it had to transcend that depth. And so it's a weird one because it starts with that heaviness. And I think by the end of it, you have that blossoming or blooming and rising. That's hard to achieve, and I'm really impressed by how everyone pulled it together. And I got the crazy idea, you know.
Well, it's unique, and yet it completes the flow of the album. Like it sits as a set piece in piece, and yet that's what's amazing is that you find that this is the same set of musicians that begins this record. And so tell me about them. Like what was the process of figuring out who was going to bring you along on this journey?
Yeah, well,
who were you going to bring along as well?
No, they're dragging me kicking and screaming down that highway. I don't want to do this at all. In fact, I just want to knit. That's my aim in life. No. I want to be an extreme knitter. That's my goal in life. They have extreme ironing, you know, have you seen that?
Extreme art?
Ironing.
Oh, extreme ironing.
Yeah, it's like a sport. It's bizarre. Yeah, so I'm going to be an extreme knitter.
Oh.
So you have to like iron in weird places. Let's try that again. Weird places.
Yes.
No, I didn't get the clatter, but that was impressive.
Yeah,
so yeah, you basically iron things and you film it, and that's how you compete. Some people do it underwater and on Mount Everest. Anyway, so it started when I was like, okay, this album, I want to make it. We managed to get the financial side flowing, which is always important. So then I'm like, I think you always need to limit yourself so that you know what you won't do. And you're like, okay, so who do I want to join in this thing? How many? Because I could have said, I want like an orchestra and everything, but it's not going to serve the project. It's not going to serve that vision. And so Alex Linares is the big one because I love working with Alex because we disagree on so many things, which is amazing. And yet we get stuff done. But it's really important to the process because it stretches the canvas in ways that I don't hear. And you know, I have the ability to say yes or no, but it doesn't matter because we still get to stretch it and I get to see those possibilities and we go places. And so I brought the songs to him, and you know, he listened back to the acoustic demos and started talking about ideas. And then like, okay, well, who can we get for this? And he knows a lot of people here in the country, and he suggested these two guys. So that would be Kirill and Borchito, and like, so we did like a preliminary rehearsal, and it was a lot of fun, and that's a good indicator. You know, there's a lot of fun, and you know, you could see that they were invested from day one, which is impressive. You know, they were curious where it would go. Apart from with Sing Me Home, they just thought it was crazy. They're like, what? Where is this going? What is it? You know, but yeah, and it was great because it's something new and a different canvas, I guess, to work within. I knew we had to have a very strong drummer, and thankfully he's probably one of the best around in the country, if not further, easily. But that was essential because I was hearing those very strong rock vibes. But I knew if you got a straight rock drummer, he wouldn't understand the nuance of other songs. Because, for instance, in If the Moon, it's I don't know, it's like a reggae folk song or a folk reggae. It's a weird loping reggae beat. And to get someone to do that, but you know, because when he initially heard it, he was like, does this need drums? And I'm like, yes. Yes, it does. Please. But I just said to him, what would Ringo do? And then he got it. I was like, Ringo didn't sit songs out very rarely, but he brought this simplistic, perfect vibe to it.
Right.
And so you get a drummer like that, it's great. And Kirill is like the, it's the strangest thing. You won't believe this. Brace yourselves. He's the only guitarist I've ever had to tell to turn up. And I don't mean just for the rehearsal, because that's normal.
Yeah.
But to turn up the volume.
Yeah.
And many times I've had to do this. I've still freaked out by it. Because he's really trying to serve the song.
Right.
And he gets so involved in his part of the song, he thinks everyone can hear it. And I'm like, no, we want to hear it, you know. And again, he's got this diversity. He's happy to explore those other things. Because if I had just a blues rock guitarist, it would have fallen into that idiom too quickly. And obviously some songs have that blues rock vibe. I mean, FM radio does. But then when you compare that to Sing Me Home, which is this New Orleans blues thing, that's a big diversity. And he doesn't do a big solo on that. He does, like I said, these beautiful swells that are like an organ. Right. When you compare those parts, this screeching slide and then this, and you're like, who could do that? Oh, Kirill can. He'll do it very quietly and you'll have to turn it up, but he did it, Right.
So, and on If the Moon, the parts are very interesting as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. And again, that was like, what's here for another guitar? It's like, well, it doesn't have to be another guitar. It can be something doing something else. And those parts came together. And that was, as I said, because of Alex. And then, of course, I asked you to come in and do some honky stick on things. And of course, that adds to it all, too, is having that play around, expanding the sound. And we had the other Alex, of course, singing, which is great because he had no studio experience, which I love because he was just so impressed by it all.
Yeah.
But I really, really wanted to capture his voice on a record. I think he's got this fantastic voice that the world needs to hear more of, and I hope they do. But I've been, I've done some songs live with him, and I just didn't want to do them without him or try and recreate his voice with someone else. Right. It doesn't make sense, What other instruments? Only two other instruments. The three, but two other. Yeah, theremin. So this was the theremin was very much my moment of whatever I hear in my head, I'm going to do it on this album. And I didn't hear an orchestra and everything. I just don't find that vastly interesting in this set of songs. But I did with If the Moon hear a theremin. And I had to think about it, and I think you asked me, where do we get a theremin? And I said, I know a guy, but it was a girl, of course.
A guy who knows a girl.
Yeah. And that was perfect to have that, and it's not let's say it's not an all-invasive instrument, but it's very distinctive.
Oh, yeah.
And it brings that song somewhere else, And finally
fits it well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre how that theremin has become, or from day one, seemed to be the lunar space travel instrument, right? Exactly. I mean, that and the stylophone,
exactly.
Right? You're going to Mars, you need two instruments. Yeah. Forget about the rocket and the Mars rover. You need these instruments, right? And we're there,
Then it's official.
Yeah. Actually, I was listening to Telstar the other day. Nora had never heard it, and I was like, you got to hear this track, right? It's just incredible. Just so out there.
Oh, yeah.
Still, I'm like, how does this guy do this? Joe Meek, right?
Yeah.
Like way back in the UK, and in a 2 up, 2 down house, and he'd rigged it in his whole house and put holes in the floor and the walls, and
he did relate.
And he didn't even have a theremin. That's right. But and then the last thing which we did at your studio, the overdubs, was the viola and violin from Bo, which is fantastic because I think on Back in the Traces, it has quite a heavy rock vibe, heavy grunge kind of thing going on that I didn't hear. I like it, and I really like how it went that way with the band because that's what they were hearing.
Yeah.
But I wanted to pull it back to somewhere that I felt it had come from more, and to balance that. And so when we put the electric violin on that, it just went. To me, it's now got this much broader canvas of sound, and it keeps it from being a grunge pastiche into something that's different, and it's got this more passionate vibe to it, which is great. So that's basically how the instrumentation slowly came together on the album with that core band and then the extras.
That's very cool. I'm out there.
You sure
It
are.
has this.
Now you've said it, man.
It's it sticks out in a way. It's got this cool like late '70s Bowie, like early '80s, late '70s, you know, somewhere between Electric Blue and Modern Love. This, you know, with that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But and this cool like Robert Fripp style guitar going on.
Yeah. It's an interesting one because I had the groove almost instantly when I wrote it just on acoustic. I had this groove, but then again with the band stretching it, I'm like, okay, this. But I knew it should be widescreen, and that's how I feel about that song. It's very much, and maybe most of the songs. I mean, when I had that ability to go to that studio with these musicians and do this thing, I really like the idea of more cinematic music, and I think that they managed to capture that.
Mm-hmm.
On I'm Out There, there was a number of influences, but the rhythm section really took it, and they went with it, and this left it open to so much, which is great. But it's also kind of an anecdote to the darker road songs.
Yeah.
So it's like midway through the album, and you have this darkness, but then even on the worst of days, if you're driving down that highway and the sun comes out, everything's good, even for that moment. And I think, you know, and it describes that journey of being out there looking, searching, which sometimes is great. You don't have to find, but just that experience of, you know, top down, wind in your hair experience. And I think that was needed, you know. The other songs can seem a bit heavy if you don't have that contrast. They all have a certain darkness to them, and I think there's very little darkness to that song. There's a joy to it.
There is, but there's this underlying beat that brings back the band in a way. It's like how important the drums are in this thing. And I was thinking of like Paul Thompson, you know, Roxy Music, and how you just they don't talk about him in the same breath of Brian Ferry, but it's the whole thing holding it together, all those albums.
I don't think you can find any great band and leave the drummer out of the equation. If you do, you're doing a disservice. It just doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
You know, you can't say like that the band has sold 40 million records and write amazing songs, but the drummer's crap.
Right.
They're doing service to what's there. You know, across every genre, you just can't rule the drummer out because they're the defining core, the engine room of the band, of the songs. I mean, unless we're changing drummers and using, you know, session drummers and drummers, then maybe you could say somebody else was designing it, fair enough. But that really doesn't happen that often in those long-term bands that have gone somewhere and done something. You know, even something like people talk about Metallica and they say Lars isn't a great thrash metal drummer. You think, yeah, but he's still taking risks. Even with Saint Anger, you have that weirdly bizarre snare choice he did on that. You're like, it's crazy. But nobody else would have done that. They would have sat back into that seat of comfort, which they very much could be in. But, you know, you see he's made these choices because he is one of the deciding factors. You mentioned the band. I mean, he could not take that drummer away. If he did, I don't know what they'd be without Levon. I mean, if ever a drummer is the heart and soul of a band, that's it right there. His voice, his playing, his arrangements. And then you talk about even great session drummers. I mean, where's Paul Simon without Steve Gadd?
Yeah.
Like, I actually would love to hear 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover without Steve Gadd, with another drummer. I don't think it would be there.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think the song exists without him. And so when it came to I'm Out There, once we had that, I think it was almost instant when he heard the song, he started this straight, really super straight, tight beat that gives it this driving force. Yeah. Which is funny because it, like I said, it mirrors FM radio, but like in a reverse mirror situation, such a brighter beat.
Yeah.
And there's none of that underlying current of darkness, of foreboding going on. He's got this deadly straight, and Alex loved the song. He jumped on that, and he's really about so the rhythm section were together from, and the hardest thing was deciding what we should place on top. That was actually the tricky thing with that song. To structure it in a good way that's gonna, serve the song. I mean, that's what we're always trying to do. Yeah. But I think it worked. I think the slide, and again, the same with FM radio, you got slide on both. They don't sound remotely like the same person. No. You know, they're like beams of sunshine.
One has got something a little more blues and
Yeah.
rock, and the other one is, like I said, it's just got this rip vibe,
Yeah.
and yet it's the same instrument, it's the same guy.
Yeah, yeah. Same studio.
And that's what
Might
that's
even
what
be the same day. I don't
that's
know.
what I
like,
was mentioning about,
Yeah.
how the
Yeah, exactly. So we were really lucky that that combination of people could stretch to those extremes. I remember, like, with the early demos with Alex talking to him, like I played him, I don't know, maybe 15, maybe more songs. And he was first like, I don't get that song. And we did it in the rehearsal tour, and he goes, I get it. And there was this shifting of perspective,
Yeah.
when he heard other people stretching it, I'm like, see, that's where it was meant to go.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just can't describe it with acoustic and voice,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so...
And how many songs did you pare down from
too many.
To the album?
At least 20.
At least 20, yeah.
20 down to 10. There was another song. There was a song that we had, I demoed it with Alex years ago. And what I mean by demo is very rough. I had like an idea for a chorus and a verse, but I'd never finished it. But we recorded it because I was thinking, will I work on it? I had forgotten about it, and he brought this song. And I was like, yeah, but Alex, I don't know any of that song. Like, I just didn't remember. And I don't, I wasn't in that space to continue writing it. So I'm like, yeah, but I have a song that might suit that same thing. And that was, I Can't Stop Breaking My Own Heart. I was like, we haven't done this. Yeah. It wasn't released, the prior version. It hasn't seen the light of day, and it's stuck in my head. So that was one of the processes. Like, okay, I knew I needed this kind of thing, but that song wasn't right for it, so I shifted to I Can't Stop Breaking My Own Heart.
Well, yeah, and that one, I mean, it's an album with a lot of unique character. That one does also pop out because it's got that, late 70s poppy punk vibe that's going on, undertones and Westcott's and stuff.
Yeah. Well, my friend Lubo, he does a lot of photography of hardcore and punk gigs, and he was at the gig we did where we were just kind of playing the album to hear it live. And when we played that song, he was like, "You finally did it! You wrote a punk song." I'm like, "Well, yeah. I mean, it's a long time ago, but I did it, of course, Right. As a teenager, I grew up around punk, and there was always punk bands in my hometown. So it's kind of like a part of me that is there, but people don't obviously see it. It's in the DIY aesthetic of me more than the music, but it's still in the music,
right.
Pick it up and do it. We'll deal with the consequence later, right? And that's very much a punk thing. And so in that song, when we started playing with the band, I heard that punk pop thing happening, and shades of Blondie in it, I think, as well, for me anyway. And those stops that are on the money that you need for that kind of song to really work. I think the great punk songs are like that. They've got these angular things in that, and then you change again, and then when the saxophones came into play on that, it just gave it that something else again. Some whole other world opens up with it, which wouldn't be obvious in pop punk. It's kind of drifts into, like, ska has more saxophones, and
It reminds me though, when it gets to those, especially on this song, and maybe a little on the end of FM radio, but there is a sort of early Roxy music vibe in there. Where the sax is angular to the song, where it's not necessarily sitting in it, but sort of a siding.
Well, that's the idea, I think, is I always reference it as stretching a canvas, because if I draw a picture and I don't necessarily see it all, or I don't see what it could be. And when you get other musicians involved, you see this whole other world. And so they pull it that way or that way, and you're like, wow, this is much bigger than I thought. And with that song,
he agrees.
He's all over that song. And with that song, it definitely needed something else, something to give it another momentum, a new voice in there. And so I Can't Stop Breaking My Own Heart.